If you're looking for a pattern with that 1920s vibe, then you've come to the right place. I'm Little John Yarns, and today we're making this beautiful flapper-inspired Juliet cap. This pattern is considered an intermediate pattern. Let's hop into the pattern breakdown. We'll break this pattern into 3 simple sections. This pattern is worked from the top down. First, we'll work on the crown section, which consists of increasing rows. And second, we'll stop increasing and build the sides of a hat. And lastly, we'll complete the edging for this cap. The materials we'll be using for this hat is any worsted weight yarn. I've used Caron Simply Soft and Deborah Norval's Everyday Yarn to complete variations of this pattern. I like these type of yarns because they're very flexible and they're less bulky, which help the stitches lay better. You'll also need a 5mm crochet hook, and don't forget to download the written PDF to follow along to this pattern. I'll leave all that information down in the description box below. I provided timestamps for this tutorial for easy pattern navigation. Alright, let's hop into the tutorial. Before we start this pattern, I want to tell you the circumference of my head. I have a 22-inch head, and I'll have a medium stitch tension. So if your stitch tension is looser or tighter, your hat size will vary because everybody's stitch tension is different. So let's start this pattern. We're going to begin by chaining 4. So let's start. So chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to slip stitch the join into the very first stitch to form a ring. Now we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Your chain 3 will count as a double crochet. We're going to double crochet back into the ring one more time. And chain 1. That is going to be our pattern repeat. 2 double crochets and chain 1. We're going to do that 5 more times. So let's go back into do a 2 double crochet, chain 1 again. So this is the first double crochet. 1, second double crochet, 2, and chain 1. So that's your second one. We're going to have a total of 6 2 double crochet chain 1s all the way around. So I'll show you one more time. 2 double crochets back into the ring. 1, back into the ring. 2, and chain 1. So I want you to pause your video here and continue placing 2 double crochets, chain 1s into the ring until you have a total of 6 clusters. So this is 1, 2, 3, and I'll meet you when you have a total of 6 clusters. Okay, we've made it back around and you have a total of 6 clusters. So let's check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you should have ended with a chain 1. We're going to slip stitch the join into the top of your chain 3 stitch. All right, and now it's time to start row 2. We're going to slip stitch 2 stitches over. So that's 1 slip stitch into the next double crochet and a slip stitch into the chain 1 space. And that's how we're going to start each row. So we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, place a double crochet back into the very same chain 1 space, and chain 1. That's your first cluster. Remember, 2 double crochets in the chain 1, we're just going to call that a cluster from here on out. So we're going to cluster once again back into the very same space. So 2 double crochets back into the same space. So that's 1 and 2, and chain 1 to finish that cluster. We're going to repeat that same sequence in each stitch, chain 1 stitch all the way around. I'll show you one more time. So place a cluster into the next chain 1 stitch, 1 double crochet back into the same stitch, 2 double crochet, chain 1 to finish that cluster. We're going to repeat that back into the same chain 1 stitch again. So 2 double crochets and a chain 1. So that's 1, 2, and chain 1. So like I said, that's your pattern sequence all the way around. We're going to put 2 clusters in each chain 1 stitch. So cluster, chain 1, cluster, cluster. All right, so pause your video here, continue placing 2 clusters in each chain 1 stitch, and I'll meet you back at the other side. Okay, we've made it back around, and you should have a total of 12 double crochet clusters going all the way around, and make sure you end with that chain 1. So let's slip stitch to join into the top of your chain 3 stitches. All right, now we're ready to start row 3. We're going to slip stitch over into the next 2 stitches. So slip stitch into the next double crochet and slip stitch into the next chain 1 stitch. And now we're ready to start our row. We're going to chain 3 just like before. 1, 2, and 3. Double crochet back into the very same stitch to complete that cluster. And chain 1. So we're going to place 2 clusters into the next chain 1 space. So we're going to place our 2 clusters in. 1 double crochet back into the same stitch. And chain 1. That's the first cluster. So let's put the second cluster back into the same stitch. 1, 2 double crochets, and a chain 1. So that is going to be our pattern repeat all the way around. It's going to be 1 cluster, 2 clusters into the same stitch. 1 cluster, 2 clusters into the same stitch. I will show you one more time just in case. So 1 cluster into the next stitch. I'm going to be moving a little bit faster. So that's 1 cluster, and now I'm going to, oops, forgot my chain 1. Now I'm going to place 2 clusters into the next stitch. Next chain 1 stitch. First double crochet back into the same stitch. And chain 1 to finish that cluster. And let's put your second cluster back into that very same chain 1 space. And chain 1 to finish that cluster. So like I said, that's your pattern repeat all the way around. So you're going to do 1 cluster, 2 clusters, 1 cluster, 2 clusters, 1 cluster, 2 cluster all the way around. And I'll meet you back at the other side. Okay, so we ended this row. You should have a total of, let me look at my pattern, 18 clusters all the way around. So now let's slip stitch to join into the top of your chain 3 stitch. All right, now we're going to be starting on row 4. We're going to slip stitch over into the next 2 stitches. So the next stitch is a double crochet, slip stitch, and slip stitch into that chain 1 space. And our pattern sequence is going to be cluster, cluster, double, cluster, cluster, double. So we'll start with a chain 3, which we know stands for double crochet. And let's start our cluster. Double crochet, chain 1. So that's our first cluster. Let's cluster into the next chain 1 space. And chain 1 to finish that cluster. So that's cluster, cluster, double. So we're going to place 2 clusters into the very next, the third chain 1 space. First double crochet. Second double crochet and a chain 1 to finish that first cluster. Let's put your next cluster into the very same chain 1 space. Back into the same stitch. And chain 1. So that is going to be your pattern repeat all the way around. So it's going to be cluster, cluster, double, cluster, cluster, double, cluster, cluster, double, all the way around, and I'll meet you back at the other side. And by the end of this row, you should have a total of 24 clusters. We've made it back around and we ended with a chain 1. Like I said, you should have a total of 24 clusters all the way around. So we're going to slip stitch to join into the top of your chain 3 stitch. All right, so now we're beginning row 5. For the next 7 rows is going to be an exact row repeat for the next 7 rows. So slip stitch over into the next 2 stitches. So slip stitch into the double crochet and slip stitch into the chain 1 stitch. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3 counts as your double crochet. Double crochet back into the ring to finish up that cluster. And chain 1. So we're going to do that all the way around, placing 1 cluster in each chain 1 space. So next chain 1 space, do 1 cluster. And chain 1 to finish that cluster. So pause your video here. I want you to put 1 cluster in each chain 1 space all the way around. And when you make it back to the other side, slip stitch to join. We're going to do that for a total of 7 rows, including this one. So pause your video here, and I'll meet you at the completion of your 7 rows. At this point, your hat should measure about 5 inches across, and don't worry, it will stretch to fit your head. Okay, we completed those additional 7 rows, and this is what your hat looks like so far. And now we're going to slip stitch into the top of your chain 3 stitch. And if you're following along to the pattern, we're about to start row 12. All right, so now we're going to chain 1. For the next 2 rows, it's going to be exactly the same. So we're going to place 1 half double crochet in each stitch all the way around. That includes your double crochets and your chain 1 space. So we're going to half double crochet into the same space that you did your chain 1. Same space you did your slip stitch to join. And half double crochet into the next stitch, which is the previous row's double crochet. And half double crochet into the chain 1 space also. So you can pause your video here. You're going to place 1 half double crochet in each stitch all the way around for a total of 2 rows. And remember, we're working into the double crochets and the chain 1 space. So pause your video here, and I'll meet you at the completion of your 2 rows of half double crochets. We finished those 2 rows of half double crochets, and you should have a total of 72 stitches around. And if you're following along to the pattern, we're on round 14. We're going to slip stitch to join into the very first half double crochet. So here's that chain 1 stitch, and the top of your half double crochet is right here. All right, we're going to chain 1 and single crochet into that very same stitch. We're going to chain 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to skip 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And single crochet into the 5th. That is going to be our pattern repeat. I'll show you one more time. We're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to skip 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. And single crochet into the 5th. We're going to do that all the way around until you make it to the other side. And when you do, you'll end up with 6 stitches left over, and we'll work those last 6 stitches together. Okay, we've made it to those last 6 stitches, and we're going to chain our last 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're completely going to skip those last 6 stitches, and we're going to slip stitch to join into the very first single crochet. All right, now we're starting on row 15. We're going to slip stitch into the chain 6 space. So slip stitch. So we're in the right position to start our row. We're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Your chain 3 will count as a double crochet. We're going to place 7 more double crochet into the ring, which will make a total of 8, including this chain 3. So this would be 2. I'm going to be moving a little bit faster. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, into your very next chain 6 space, we're going to place a single crochet. And that is going to be our pattern repeat all the way across. We're going to place 8 double crochet into this space, followed by a single crochet, 8 double crochet, followed by a single crochet, all the way around until you get to the other side. And pause your video here, and I'll meet you at the other side. We've made it back around, and you should have a total of 7 fans all the way around. And if you're following along to the pattern, we're about to start our very last row, row 16. So we are going to slip stitch into the top of your chain 3 stitch. 1, 2, 3, slip stitch to join. And we're going to chain 1 and single crochet into that very same stitch. And now we're going to start our DC Picot Stitch. If I pronounce that right, give me a thumbs up down in the comment box. I never know how to pronounce it correctly. So into the very next stitch, we're going to double crochet. And now we're going to do our Picot Stitch. We're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. To complete this stitch, we're going to insert our hook from the front to the back of the previous DC that we just did. So here's that double crochet. We're going to go from the front to the back, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull that loop through the chain on your hook. As simple as that. I'll show you one more time. We'll do our double crochet. We're going to chain 3 for our Picot Stitch. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to insert the hook from the front to the back through the space right here. Front to the back, pull up a loop, and pull that loop through the loop on your hook. As simple as that. All right, we're going to do that 4 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So pause your video here, continue doing that 4 more times, and I'll meet you when you're done. Okay, we completed those stitches. So you should have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 double crochets with picot stitches on it. And you should have 1 more double crochet here. So we're just going to place 1 normal double crochet into the next stitch. No picot stitch. All right, you'll see a single crochet from the previous row. We're just going to slip stitch into that previous row's single crochet. So here's that. And we're just going to slip stitch. All right, the next fan is going to be pretty similar to this one, but just a little change. So we're going to double crochet, picot stitch into the next 7 stitches. And on the 8th, we're just going to put a regular double crochet. All right, I'll work the first one with you. So double crochet. Chain 3 for your picot stitch. Insert from the front to the back. Yarn over, pull through your work, and pull through the work on your hook. And that is your very first one. Okay, we're going to do that 7 more times. We're going to do that 6 more times. So pause your video here, and I'll meet you when you complete those next 6. Okay, you completed those additional 6, and you should have a total of 7 double crochets with picot stitches on the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And on that very 8th double crochet, you're just going to put a normal double crochet like before. And you're going to slip stitch into the previous row's single crochet. So here's that single crochet. We're just going to slip stitch right there. All right, so that is going to be our pattern repeat all the way around. So you're going to double crochet picot into the next 7 stitches, followed by a regular single double crochet, then a slip stitch. So just in case, I'll write that up above if it sounds confusing. So pause your video here, continue with that pattern, and I'll meet you back at the other side. Okay, we've made it back around, and we're not going to slip stitch to join. We're going to make a double crochet picot stitch on the very first single crochet that you had in the beginning of your row. As you can see, there's only 6 peaks here, and we're going to finish up and make that 7th. So, yarn over and place a double crochet into that very first single crochet. Followed by your picot stitch. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Go from the front to the back, yarn over, pull through 1, and pull through the one on your hook. So now we're just going to slip stitch to join into that very next double crochet. So you see the space here? We're just going to slip stitch to join and fasten off your work. And your hat is complete. I'll show you what it looks like all done. If you like this tutorial, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out my other Crochet Vintage hats. Alright guys, I'll see you all on the very next tutorial.